Well, Alien Romulus has at last debuted in theaters, and people are finally giving their opinions on it. I saw the film on August 15th in IMAX, and I'll bet you're wondering what I thought of it. As you might expect, I have conflicting thoughts on the whole thing, and some of those thoughts are going to require revealing some spoilers, unfortunately. So this video is going to be split into several sections. The first part will be a non-spoiler review of the film, and then everything in part 2 and onward will be full of spoilers. There will be timestamps on this video to help you avoid spoilers, so you can come back to the rest of the video once you've seen the movie if that's your intention. Otherwise, sit back and enjoy, because this is not going to be your typical review. I will be referencing my hour-long video essay on Alien, so be sure to watch that if you haven't as well, because boy, do we have a lot to talk about. While scavenging the deep ends of a derelict space station, a group of young space colonists come face to face with the most terrifying life form in the universe. Alien Romulus is directed by Fede Alvarez, the guy who directed the 2013 Evil Dead remake. So if you dug Alvarez's directing style and cinematography in that, you're in for a major treat. Because holy Cthulhu, is this a gorgeous fucking film. Hands down, probably one of the best looking in the entire franchise, next to the original. The CGI and practical effects are blended so well that I almost couldn't tell what was CGI and what wasn't. And amazingly, this film was made for a modest $80 million. If it pulls major business, the IMAX theater I was in on the 15th was nearly packed, so that's probably a good indication, then it's going to have no trouble making its money back. I remember seeing people on Facebook bitching about how cheap the movie looked in stills, and I'm happy to say nothing in this looks cheap, and I'm sure that's aided in no small part by the gorgeous cinematography. Let's talk about set design for a minute. The sets in this movie are spot on, complete with CRT monitors and all that retro futuristic goodness, and unsurprisingly seems to pull heavily from Alien Isolation, the awesome survival horror game released by Creative Assembly and Feral Interactive back in 2014. Seriously, if you haven't played it, go play it. The environments, especially those set in space, feel so much like Sevastopol Station. And if you're a fan of the game, you'll be doing a disservice to yourself if you don't see this movie in IMAX. Cailee Spaeny plays the lead female protagonist named Rain, and David Johnson plays her brother Andy. The performances range from good to great, and those performances definitely do some of the heavy lifting in terms of giving us just enough information about these characters before the inevitable happens. I mean, this is an Alien film after all, so you know there's going to be some collateral damage. David Johnson is the standout actor in this film, though, and I can't wait to see what he does next. But is it good? Yes, it's good. But there's a big ol' queen-sized fucking caveat there. If you're more of a casual fan of the Alien franchise, and if you enjoyed Prometheus and Covenant, if you've watched my Alien video essay, then you know I'm not, then you're probably going to love this film. If, however, you are a big cosmic horror fan like I am, who enjoys the original Alien film for Dan O'Bannon's excellent writing, its nods to H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, and the original space jockey design, then you're going to have some mixed feelings when you get out of the theater. I've seen a lot of YouTube reviewers saying that Ridley Scott is the creator of Alien, and that's just not true. Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett are the original creators of Alien. Ridley Scott and H.R. Giger came on later. Ridley Scott and the rest of the team definitely deserves credit for the visual aspects of the film, as does Giger, but it was very much Dan O'Bannon's creation. Something I'll be going further in depth into in my next giant Alien video essay, due out sometime in the next couple of months, I promise. As far as visuals go, Alien Romulus definitely hits all the right notes. But story-wise, I was a little disappointed with the pacing, and many of the set pieces in the film feel like a grab bag of greatest hits moments taken from pretty much every film in the franchise, even Resurrection, believe it or not. In fact, I think the only film that doesn't get a reference is David Fincher's entry in the franchise Alien 3, which he's disowned. The kills are all pretty great, many of them suitably gory and gruesome, and if you're a fan of body horror, you're in luck, there's a ton of that here. However, the ending left me a little disappointed, something that may or may not change if I can get over a certain aspect of it. Overall, Alien Romulus does do some interesting things in its runtime, but for me at least, the connection to Prometheus and Covenant really drag it down and make me like it less than I otherwise would. I watched Movie Bob's video on Romulus the night after I wrote the first draft of this script, and I pretty much agree with him. It's the best Alien movie in years, but it's also not very interesting. Which is kind of interesting because I said it does interesting things, but the film itself overall is not as interesting as some of the worst films in the franchise, and that says something. But despite all of that, I still think it's a damn good time and a solid science fiction horror film. So see it in IMAX if you can. Okay, now for those of you who are here to hear my complete thoughts on the film, let's jump into spoiler territory. While Alien Romulus is technically the best Alien film since Aliens, that isn't exactly a high bar to top. If Alien is a 10 out of 10, and Aliens is a 9 out of 10, then Romulus is a 7 out of 10, with every film after Aliens getting progressively worse, and then Prometheus and Covenant sharing a dogshit rating. Now, if you've watched my Alien video essay, What Are You Doing If You Haven't, you know I don't like the prequels. The original space jockey is one of my favorite things about the original Alien film. It's such a haunting and beautiful design that hints at a rich and terrifying universe, something that was clearly inspired by At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft, which is a novella that sees a group of scientific explorers face the horrors of deep time in Antarctica, when they discover a series of mountain peaks that are much taller than Everest, i.e., mountains that should not be. Prometheus reduces this weird, interesting design to a tall, white humanoid alien with black eyes, and it looks so damn boring. Even the suits that are meant to mimic the space jockey don't really do a good job, feeling more space marine than unknowable biomechanical alien. Worse yet, Prometheus also makes the alien universe feel incredibly small, by having these so-called engineers basically make humanity from their weird space spooge. Alien Covenant takes what Prometheus did with the virus that created humanity and the xenomorph and makes it feel even smaller, by having David, the evil android in Prometheus, create the xenomorph we know from the first film. Dan O'Bannon's original idea for the alien was for it to be like a cicada. Cicadas hibernate anywhere from 13 to 17 years. The facehuggers we see in Alien, though, are an organism that can hibernate for millions. Just think about that. A predatory extremophile species that's able to lie dormant longer than most civilizations or species are likely to exist. And they're just out there in the cold, dark reaches of space, waiting for some unlucky son of a bitch to stumble upon them so they can start the cycle over again. That's terrifying. And Alien Romulus is a film that wants to keep to the themes of the original Alien. The idea that we humans weren't meant to voyage far is even flat out stated by Rook, played by not Ian Holm. This is illustrated effectively when Rain, the main character, tries to get a transport pass to another world, where the sun actually shines in the atmosphere, when she thinks her indentured servitude time is up and is promptly denied by the Weyland-Yutani rep. The motivation of this ragtag group of young people works well. They're sick of the company's cyberpunk bullshit and want to leave their space. Fortunately, there's a decommissioned Weyland-Yutani spacecraft passing near the planet they live on, and all they have to do is go up there and steal some cryopods so they can make the 9-year journey to this other planet. Of course, none of that goes to plan. That space station is obviously in bad shape because it's suffered a xenomorph infestation. And these young colonists are forced to place their trust in a company android named Rook, and a recently rebooted Andy, who is hands down the best character in this film, by the way, who's acting strangely after having his AI and clearance upgraded to help some colonists out of a jam with some facehuggers. From the moment the colonists turn the gravity on in the station, and by the way, this film does some interesting things with gravity, I'm just gonna say that right there, shit goes from bad to worse. One of them ends up pregnant with a face-sex alien's baby, and another gets melted with acid from a xenomorph cocoon, complete with a vaginal opening and everything. I'd say the movie was cooking with gas, leading to a sequence where Rain and company reach a laboratory where Weyland-Yutani scientists were performing experiments trying to make a human xeno hybrid. Prometheus is referenced directly in the scene, along with a tidbit of information that informs the movie's central themes. Among them, that we are not meant to voyage far. Rook tells Rain that their colonies are dying, that humans are too fragile to survive out in the depths of space. And then Rook mentions that when they discovered the xenomorph originally encountered by the Nostromo crew, they found it was alive in the black of space. Yeah, the beginning of the movie shows them exploring the wreckage of the Nostromo and the space tanker it was hauling, and a weird cocoon or rock containing the alien floating amidst the wreckage. It's weird, don't get me wrong, but depending on how far away the ship was from LV-426 and Calpamos, it's possible the wreckage's center of gravity would have pulled the xenomorph toward it. The scientists discovered a strange microorganism, read Prometheus space spooge, was responsible for the alien's remarkable survivability, even in the vacuum of space, followed by a name drop for either a Prometheus file or calling the serum developed by the scientists meant to enhance human colonists Prometheus 5 or some shit. I'm not sure which it is, I've only seen the movie once. The problem with connecting this movie to Prometheus is that their themes are at odds with each other. Prometheus is at the Mountains of Madness with ancient aliens. And the whole thing behind ancient aliens is that humans are the most special boys, because aliens created and gave us civilization or some other bullshit. That's the whole reason why Prometheus doesn't work. It also spits in the face of Dan O'Bannon's original authorial intent. And because Alien Romulus leans so heavily on what Prometheus and Covenant did, it's basically in this moment sending a mixed message. Now, this is probably something that is going to go over most people's heads, and that's okay. I'm a giant fucking nerd, I get it. But it's a serious problem that I can't resolve with the film. But you know, while I was watching the film, I thought, hell, maybe they'll turn around and show us that this so-called gift to mankind is a Pandora's box. And that is sort of what happens. But the ending also references one of the worst parts of the Alien franchise, something I was frankly really surprised by. The end of Alien Romulus was kind of predictable, at least for me. But I was certainly not expecting the film to reference one of the most controversial things in the Alien universe. And that is the concept of a hybrid between a human and a xenomorph, otherwise known as the newborn. Most people hate this thing. It's ugly, it's not scary, at least to me, and it feels campy. There is such thing as an alien bingo card. But Alien Romulus uses the idea of a hybrid very differently. Isabel Marced's character, Kay, is the only colonist who remains aboard their cargo freighter, and the reason for that is she's pregnant with some asshole's baby. Now, what can you possibly do with a pregnant character in an Alien film? Remember the company android, Rook, who might as well just be called Ash because it's Ian Holmes' voice and face? Yes, that's extremely creepy because he died recently. Well, he tells Andy that their main objective is to get this new serum back to the colony for further study, that it has the ability to heal grievous wounds. And who ends up holding this supposed wonder medicine? Kay. In order to save her life after suffering a wound that's causing her to lose a lot of blood, Rook mentions the serum, that it's the only way to save Kay. But Rain, knowing she can't trust the company, says it's a bad idea and urges Kay not to use it. But as soon as Rain and Andy are out of view, Kay injects herself with one of the applicators, which eventually leads to her baby being transformed into a strange cross between a Prometheus engineer, a human, and a xenomorph. And I'll admit that when I first saw this, it did surprise me. A small corner of the theater erupted with a gasp, which was fun to hear. And the thing did look pretty creepy when it was crawling on all fours. I mean, what else are you gonna do with a pregnant character in an Alien movie, right? But when it stands up and you get a good look at it, I feel like it starts to look kind of silly, and my wife felt very similar about this. I started to think of it as the Long Boy, because it's literally a newborn, and he's kind of like Slender Man, but a xenomorph. You get it. Hopefully the name catches on. And I think there is certainly going to be a portion of the audience that finds this thing to be terrifying. I'm of two minds about it, though. Mainly because of the connection to Prometheus. The black eyes and engineer face just serve to remind me of Prometheus, and it feels like it's just too much baggage. Imagine, instead, what it could have looked like with the influence of the original space jockey design. I don't know how you'd explain it, but it would look way freakier, I would wager. But seriously, can we get a film where the final girl kills one of these things without blowing them out a damn airlock? Not to mention the connection to Alien Resurrection and the bad taste that left in everyone's mouths. Actually, I think that's my biggest problem with this ending. It's literally the same as Resurrection's ending. Both newborns die in similar ways, and it ultimately ends up feeling kind of lazy. There's a whole science lab on this fucking space station, right? So presumably there's a ton of different chemicals at their disposal. What if one of these films ended with the solution of trying to neutralize the xenomorph's acid blood? Think about it. You normally make an acid go inert by adding a base to the mix. Some acids will crystallize during this process, and if the right chemical were used, the colonists could essentially lock a xeno in a room and flood it with this crap and have them crystallize from within. It could be a spectacular sight. It could be a set piece. The Martian meets Alien. There you go. Actually, I wrote that book already, and it's getting re-released with a sick new cover. Shout out to Matt Kaminsky, who did the artwork for this new edition that'll be hitting stores in a few months. Anyway, moving on. It's a ballsy move. I'll give Fede Alvarez that. But we'll have to see how this creature stands the test of time. I could see people really digging this, having a good idea that was executed poorly revisited like this, but it could go either way, too. And that kind of leads to my next problem with Romulus, and that's its pacing and story. As I mentioned in the non-spoiler section, Alien Romulus at times feels like the equivalent of a greatest hits album from your favorite band. You like all the songs on it, but maybe you're not sure those songs work well as a playlist. And that's kind of how I feel about the story in Romulus. It's like this. Is your movie going to be a moody, voyeuristic cosmic horror film that slowly builds into this crescendo of violence, body horror, and cosmic dread? Or do you want a bunch of space marines and big action set pieces? If you try to do both, it can work, but you kind of lose out on the key things that make those stories work on their own. Alien is so creepy because it is a slow burn. It lets you linger, stalking the characters like you're an accomplice to humanity essentially being told you were not meant to voyage far. But if you didn't have that hour wait to see the xenomorph, you lose all that buildup, all the tension that results from the creeping, brooding atmosphere, and all that time getting to know the crew. The fast pace of Alien Romulus's biggest casualty is that it loses the hour-long journey getting to know the crew of the ship. We get just enough information about each character to start to care about them as people, but it's such a brief glimpse at their lives that we never feel like we know anyone well other than Andy and, I guess, Rain. In fact, Rain feels a little underdeveloped as a character. We know her parents died and her father left her Andy as a kind of protector. We know she's conflicted about having to leave him behind because the other faction in the Alien universe has outlawed androids, but we don't know why she's so resilient. She's kind of like Rey in The Force Awakens in that regard. And a lot of this film feels like The Force Awakens of the Alien franchise, complete with cheesy callbacks to badass lines in better movies. Like, come on, just write new lines. I think if this film were structured to give us a slower burn before we reach the space station, it could help the film's pacing tremendously and have the added benefit of allowing us to get to know the other characters like we did with the crew of the Nostromo. It would also give us plenty of opportunities to explore how the company abuses their workers, to hammer home the necessity of the mission that dooms the majority of the characters. Hell, Aliens didn't just jump into the action either. It had a slower burn leading up to the arrival at LV-426, so you could get to know the new Space Marine characters and how they relate to Ripley. And in Aliens, it never feels like a retread of the first film. This would also run the risk of making the film too much like the original film, but I think if you change the final act up a bit, it could still work. Now, one thing I feel is missing from a lot of these films is the presence of ruins similar in vibe to the space jockey ship. If there are civilizations that can exist for millions of years, then why not have one of these worlds have some Lovecraftian alien ruins that contributes to the plot? Not like Prometheus or Covenant, they don't pull it off in the slightest. You can't out-Giger Giger, as Carl might say. In essence, I'd rather see this same concept written by Dan O'Bannon, rest in peace, or someone who is familiar with his work and influences, but still directed by Fede Alvarez. Does that make sense? Still, really, in the grand scheme of things, most people won't care about the things I'm complaining about because they don't know what they're missing. They'll probably enjoy or dislike the movie for entirely different reasons. But to be clear, I don't hate this film. I actually like it overall. Opinions can be nuanced like that, believe it or not. I don't want anyone who watches my videos to think that my opinion is the only way. Really, I hope you were able to go into this film nearly blind like I did, and were able to make up your own mind about the material. Alien Romulus is a good film, but I feel like it's not a great one. It's exciting, scary, and is sure to be the source of much discussion in the Alien fandom. It's the best Alien film since Aliens, and that ain't half bad. But what did you think of the film? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or does your opinion fall somewhere in between? Do you agree with my takes here? Why not? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to deploy those likes and share this video with someone who loves video essays, media analysis, and nerd shit. I'm Eric Malikyte. Here's a free sci-fi horror ebook for you. You're welcome, and I'll see you next time, Space Cowboy.